Does everybody recognize and realize the connection of what I was speaking about reversing things? Recognize the connection between that and the mighty area of Medivesco. So you thought I'd forgotten. Or I thought you'd forgotten. I can't remember which it is, but we're short of time tonight. I want to remind you about Medivesco. Remind you and specify verbally a few corners that I did not necessarily chop off the time or two that I've mentioned it before. I want everyone in your own thinking to have a full picture that Medivesco, the reality behind, of course I made up the word, Medivesco is not some sort of ordinary study, especially worry study. I made that up, a hyphenated new word, but it's not a kind of worry study wherein you're looking at what seems to be some problem you have on the basis that you are expecting, you desire some specific change in the problem. Now those of you, I guess, that maybe seeing this tape or miss, Medivesco is the first example I ever gave of it, is the phenomenon of going to the doctor when you don't feel good, and he can't find anything wrong, and yet when you leave, if not before the office visit, you're all right. And if you're a little bit better and you've got a good memory and you've got a good nervous system, the kind of nervous system I like to see here, you should be aware of the fact that you've been ill in the past and finally get around to calling the doctor, make an appointment, and hang up the phone, and you're all right. Medivesco is the phenomenon of apparently simply an inquiry, a look into some problem. Seems to alleviate, if not cure, the problem. But this is not some ordinary examination of people saying, well, I don't feel good. It is not the looking into it on their own, wherein they have a desired result in mind. That's not Medivesco. You can't, there's no control there. This is not the reality of which I speak. The actual use of Medivesco is that you have to scrutinize whatever seems to be the problem in a way that ordinary people would want to call it objective, and I've already told you that that is not true. And someday soon I'm going to speak on my own kind of mapping of that area, and I was going to refer to it, I'll go ahead and tell you, since I've used the term once or twice in the last couple of weeks, as free time. But at any rate, it's what ordinary intelligence would want to call objective, and that is you look into what seems to be a reoccurring health problem that goes away when you call up and make an appointment with a doctor, or that may go away when you just think, well, if I go to a doctor, he may want to take a blood sample, and let us say that you're the type of blood samples fall on your scale of things you like somewhere between meeting Big Bad John in an alleyway and taking out your own tonsils with a pair of pliers. And so you just think about having a blood test and suddenly you're cured. But it is a kind of awareness of the fact that this happens, but then if you're going to use it, it cannot be on the basis. It will fail. You cannot use it if it's on the basis that you have some ordinary, that is just everyday program in mind that, all right, I'm going to look into this, and I'm going to use the reality of Medivesco in such a way that just looking into it is going to begin to alter it, and so I'm going to then alter it in such and such way. That is to cure it. You're doomed. It will not work. It will not work. Ordinary people, when I describe what I mean by Medivesco, there'd be people throughout the world that if they heard it, they'd go, yeah, that kind of thing happens, and they'd want to discuss, if they were cityfied, sophisticated enough, would probably want to discuss something about psychosomatic illness, the power of suggestion, etc., which is a very simplistic attempt to look into this, except, notice this, there is no continuing attempt for humanity to look into this. ordinary people, if they were made aware of it, for the sake of some discussion that I was having with them, and I used enough examples that we would have many people of ordinary intelligence would go, yeah, there is some validity to what you say. There is some basis for that. But then they would look at it, rather than being a boon of some kind, they would look at it. Once they thought about it for a second, I suggest that here's the way it would seem to ordinary intelligence. Old intelligence says, all right, that kind of thing does happen. It's happened to me, and I hear you. It does happen. I can feel it. It happens in life. But their attitude toward it would be that it is an untimely result. It is unwanted, usually, and at the very least, it's uncontrollable. And thus it ends up being a kind of, I guess to wrap it up, I could call it, from their view, an unwanted anomaly. An uncontrollable anomaly. Let me wrap it with that. An uncontrollable. That, yeah, that kind of thing happens, except I've called a doctor before, to use your example. They might say to me, I've called a doctor before when I felt bad, and it didn't do a damn thing. And I've gone ahead and went and kept my appointment. And the doctor said I couldn't find anything wrong with you. I've been having these migraines for years, and I keep going to changing doctors, and they can't find anything, and it doesn't help. So, what you're saying, it has happened in other instances with me and people I know, but it does not happen all the time. That is, in other words, it is uncontrollable. It is an anomaly. And it's not if you know how to use it. The thing is that I was trying to generally sketch for you, one who would aspire to new intelligence, a real revolutionist, cannot be concerned about any kind of specific control over the process of Medivesco, in that you cannot say, I'm going to make a change in this specific way. The real revolutionist simply wants the thing changed. Whereas old intelligence, that is everybody at city level, if you say, well, I have a trick, I have a method, I have a tool that you could use, and you say, what it will do is we'll break up some habit pattern you have, even perhaps in the physical maladies that you seem to experience. And they go, well, tell me about it. And that's all right. You can use it, and I'm going to describe it to you, except you cannot have some specific goal in mind. And I would suggest that most of the people of ordinary, decent city intelligence would immediately abandon me. Like, you're nuts. But do you hear me that simultaneously, once I described it and I said, all right, I call it Medivesco, and here it is, and they go, yeah, I know, you're right, there's some validity to that. And they say, and you're saying that you can use that. And I say, yeah, but I told you can't have a specific thing in mind. Then if they were sort of sly, let us say, they might go to themselves, well, the guy's an idiot, because you got to have an aim in mind to use it. And they might say, all right, thanks a lot, and they'd leave, and they'd think, that is true, you can use that because it happens accidentally. But if it happens accidentally, it's uncontrollable. And then they might think, well, one reason it's uncontrollable is we're not normally aware of it. But now if you're aware of it, you might be able to control it, but to control it requires one thing. What? And they would say to themselves, well, you got to have some intention. There's no way to control it. If they were semi-well-read enough, suddenly the great words of Marcus Aurelius might come back about, if a ship knows not for what port it makes, no wind is the right wind. So no Medivesco would be the right Medivesco unless you've got some purpose in mind. And of course I must tell you, good old Marcus notwithstanding is nay, nay. Medivesco cannot be used if you're trying to specifically control it. The point is, it is if you can fathom what it is, if you recognize what it is, and you use it, it's on the basis that I want this thing changed, and it's sort of, to be crude, it's to hell with how it changes right now. I simply want it changed. But it is not Medivesco. You cannot use it. It is not within your power whatsoever. It's turned into something else. That even if you hear me describe the reality that just happens to Medivesco, to ordinary people, it's happened to all of you in your life, and you go, yeah, now that's all right, it can be used. And you go, yeah, all right, now that's all right, but if you're going to use it, you can't have a specific idea in mind. Then that's when the yes slow down. The cheers of the crowd and the smell of the grease paint gets faint. let me refer you back. Last time we met, and I was pointing out about the process of reversing, about how it happens in life, and fame and fortune awaits many people who can come up with an idea of simply reversing something. Of course, it's life getting rich and famous. It's just letting these other people take bows and collect their money for the time being. And I was pointing out that other example that someone asked me about recently of someone attempting to ward off an unwanted suitor. And that the more they kept saying, I'm not interested, verbally and otherwise, the more impassioned this would-be sexual assaulter seemed to get. And I pointed out what to some of you, as soon as I said it, should be obvious by now, that if you simply change the way you're reacting, and I did not get simplistic and crude enough and direct enough last time we met, and I'll do it now because you were supposed to have been able to go ahead yourself and now say things without saying them to yourself that go, ooh. All right, one way. Assuming the example that I gave, that I described it the way it was described to me, that I'm minding my own business and this other person begins to hit on me. And I'm not interested, and they hit on me more. And the next time I see them, I even say something like that I thought I did, that kind of cut them off, and they ask, well, where do you live? What do you do? What time do you get home? Do you got a steady boyfriend or girlfriend? And the more I tried to show that I was not interested, the more they seemed to attack me, to pursue me. All right. Now, I didn't go ahead and say it specifically, but under all ordinary conditions, you could take what I said the last time we met about reversing it. And if you want to see this other person lose interest, just like is you walk in the next time you see them and simply do them. That is, reverse, instead of you acting the way you've been acting, is go in and say, hey, I never did find out where you live. What time do you get off? Are you here a lot? I see you here a lot. You thought I hadn't noticed. I see you here every time I'm here. I bet you didn't even notice me. And of course the guy or the girl's been hitting on you, and you simply play like that never happened, and you simply start doing them to them. That is, doing what they've been doing to you, and say, come on, tell me where you live. I bet you got 2 or 3 boyfriends or girlfriends. I bet I wouldn't have a chance with you. Oh, come on. I assure you that the other person, and suddenly they're going to look up, and they're just going to look over your shoulder. It's going to go away. Their pornographic plans for you are gone. They're going to suddenly realize right then, the hell, I don't even have a pornograph to play you on. It's like their sexual interest in you is gone. You have reversed the current. They're no longer interested. And it can, I said I could do it, and you could do it. If you had the nerve and the knowledge, I did that. All right, it could take 15 seconds. It might take 5 seconds for it to strike the other person, and then it might take another 10 or 15, like for it to be absorbed, let us say. And then them begin to look off like, you'd be lucky to ever get another decent word out of them. Not that they'd necessarily be hostile, but it's like you would cease to exist. Every time they'd see you, they'd look right through you. You now have the sexual attraction and interest to them, that most people would have for a cement block, except for some of you stranger people. All right, there is the immediacy, and an example that most of you can feel by now, of reversing it. Simply turning back the way energy is flowing, but to reverse what you're doing. Metavesco, a larger description of all of this, is to investigate, but it has to be in what would actually be an objective manner. That is, with no goal in mind. Now, your own nervous system has a goal in mind, or you would not have enough interest to want to look into it. So that is a given. You got to understand that. You're not going to look into anything. You're not going to think about it unless, tied into that, to your own nervous system, is the energy that makes you find this to be of some interest, either negative or positive. And so for me to say that you can have no goal in mind and do this, you got to understand part of the dialogue already has a goal in mind. That is, I don't like this, or I do like this, and how can I increase my activity in it? But you cannot listen to that. You cannot let both aspects of the dialogue pick up that song. You're aware of the fact, all right, part of me, part of the dialogue does not like this and wants it changed. And I'm almost in agreement. I'm not going to say so. Because if you say so, then it's done for. Then you simply want things to change, and things are not going to change. Or if they do change, they'll come out and you will say, you'll just repeat my words to yourself, you'll think, well, this change is kind of untimely. I'm not sure I wanted it this way. It's out of control, as a matter of fact. I bet it's a flying A, an anomaly. It's uncontrollable, unpredictable. It's never what you want, unless you understand that there is a phenomenon that's unrecognized. It is indeed, in sort of a free time area, it is a kind of anomaly in that it happens in life to ordinary people, but life has not arranged things in the nervous system for ordinary people to even take any serious note of it. So in a sense, it is an anomaly. That is, it happens, as many other things do that I have detailed for you and sketched for you and hinted for you. It happens continually, and ordinary people are walking around. It is not part of life's need for people to recognize this, much less to use it, but you can use it. It is the basis, I would suggest to you, of all the old ideas of the unexamined life is not worth living. You should know yourself. You should observe yourself. You should watch what you do. You should study your own life. All of that are crude fumes arising from this very fact that nothing, and this is not the way to put it, but there is no way to put it, so here goes. Other than this possibility, remember, there may be a way to put it. I told you can reverse anything. This is not the way to put it, back where I was. But there can be nothing in any way sacred. Not just in a religious sense, but everything about you. Everything that seems to be you. Everything that you seem to think. Everything that you seem to feel. You don't need just me. You can't rely just on me in these thrice weekly meetings. Is everything going on in you? Everything going on out there? If you could, I'll get around to it, as I said, but right now let's call it what people think of as objectively. As you try to look at, to what end? What is this going on for? Why do I keep getting sick? Why do I keep getting sick? And then why do I insist that I will never call a doctor? And then why does I normally go through this process for normally 2 weeks, and then I'll normally call a doctor, and then normally by the time I call a doctor and hang up, the symptoms are gone. But it can't be right or wrong, like, boy, am I dumb. Boy, is my unconscious mind driving me nuts. Boy, is this my mother's doing because she was a hyper-contractor. You can't deal with any of that. It's just, That is getting closer to the reality of Medivesco. It is a kind of free-time scrutiny. It's a kind of non-specific investigation. It is, to again steal from the city and embellish on it into a further dimension, it would be a greater reality of the scientific method. That is, to look into something, which they can't do in the city, ordinary intelligence can't, but they describe it correctly, is the true scientific method, is I will investigate this area with no preconceived notions. And of course everybody does. If nothing else, the preconceived notion is, maybe this will win me a Nobel. Or I better find something quick, or tenure is going to be... So there's always a preconceived notion. This is a preconceived notion of, I assume that this will help my career. I assume this will help my life. I assume I will enjoy it. I assume I will learn something. I assume I may learn something and teach others something. That is not the true scientific method. Not in the 5D world. Not in the real revolutionary world. And there is no way to describe it unless there is a way to describe it. But right now there is no way to describe it. People can talk about that, but they can't do it. You can do it if you belong here. That didn't describe it well, but you can do it. Those of you that's gotten anything out of this, you've already done it. You learned something, here I go. You learned something, and you weren't prepared to learn it. You discovered something, and you weren't looking for it. You discovered something, and you went, You discovered something of value, and you didn't know it had any value. You discovered something and went, wow, and then forgot about it. You discovered something and thought, boy, I discovered something and it's not worth anything. I'm trying to give you a salad bar. That would be closer to the reality of the exercise, the use of Medivesco. It's the investigation. It would be taking from the salad bar with no preconceived notion of, I don't know what that thing is, but it looks awfully close to a zucchini, and I don't like zucchini. You got to be able to pick up something and almost have no notion about, I don't know how it tastes, of course, part of the dialogue is going to say, hey, wise up, that looks an awful lot like a zucchini. I don't care what they call it. Me and you know that's a zucchini. You have to treat it like, well, you may know that, I don't know that. Why am I going to listen to you? And what have you ever done for me? Call a spade for me. Call a zucchini for me. What good's that ever done for me? Just kept me locked into liking spades and not liking zucchinis. I'll give you at least a water-soluble tattoo for the night is never, once you understand it, but never underestimate the potential of Medivesco. Never. And if you don't use it, you're underestimating the potential. Yeah. And if you do use it, and you're expecting to get this change that you want, specific change, you don't understand the potential. Because you'll never experience the actual use of it. Next paragraph. May I suggest to you something else I've been talking about off and on? You notice I continually say that? I've been talking about this off and on. Let's reverse it. Now, here's something I've never mentioned before. Maybe some of you will hear, wait a minute, you were talking about that. What difference does it make? All right, I'll put it this way. I continually say, well, here's something I've been talking about a little bit, and I'm going to be a little more specific. And then it's not something I've been talking about, and you think it is. Or else it is something I've been thinking about, and you go, yeah, you're right, you never talked about it. See, it makes it a bit more interesting if you don't know where you are. Because if you know where you are, you're in the city. I know that. You can't fool me. But here's what I was going to suggest to you, that somebody aspiring to a new intelligence, a real revolutionist, would very likely look upon the internal dialogue going on in everybody. Would look upon the internal dialogue as being a kind of literally, now I want to insist on literally, superfluous, silly, sophomoric background noise. Now some of you, I bet, will think I've already said such as this before, but I want to tell you I am speaking and suggesting literally that this dialogue, that about covers it for me. It's silly, it's sophomoric, it's unrealistic, and it's personally, once you see it, it is personally meaningless. It is no more than the inescapable noises of your stomach, or if you get good, to hear the rushing of the blood. It's music in the brain. It's elevator music in your own skull. Now this is not some half-baked would-be proverb or throwaway idea that I'm coming up with. I've been fooling around the edges of this. I just want to tell you, no, I'll stick with right now. I want to suggest to you that somebody properly involved with this, somebody in this, would begin to, very likely, look at all of this, not piecemeal, not some of it of, well, some of this is better, some of this is possible, a little more profitable than others, but hell, he's right, a lot of this is garbage. What do you mean a lot of this is garbage? What if what I'm suggesting to you is a quite reasonable, quite efficient, minimally efficient attitude toward the dialogue itself? I don't care what your dialogue is. I don't care if it seems to be based more around your behavior, more around your physical life, more around your intellectual life. I don't care what it is. I don't care whether you think about the past a lot, whether you seem to plan a lot in the future. if you had the continuing awareness of how impertinent, how sophomoric, just childish, but how inescapable. As I was not drawing parallels of stomach noises with no basis. It is not that different, except in the world of thinking, in the world of intellectual humans. That is, those with a nervous system that has the molecules that can talk. No one ever questions this. No one ever has. As to the basic pertinence of this. Nobody ever has, no matter what you think. Now, people do it piecemeal. In the same way they can't understand metaphysical, they do it piecemeal. Like, all right, there's certain parts of my thinking processes that you're correct, have no place in a civilized human. I mean, the things I think about sexually, I couldn't tell you. The hostility I still harbor for my dear deceased mother. You're right, parts of this. What do you mean parts of this? I'm suggesting you most strongly. I'm going to say it again, literally. I'm not making this conditionally. I'm suggesting you that literally, a real revolutionist might begin to see the whole process, not to wrestle it down, not try to strangle it, not try to reform it. It's noise. Not bad noise, not semi-bad noise, not serious noise, not upsetting noise, not partially upsetting noise, not partially upsetting noise, and partially good noise. None of that. That the whole thing, you might as well have been born, with cheap fillings in your teeth, and ever since you've been alive, you've been picking up 2 or 3 real low-watt AM stations, and they run right into your brain, and you hear them, or you were born with warts on your face, on your skull. That's it. I'm suggesting to you that literally, once you understand it, that the whole process that is natural, is normal, it must be activated for you to even be where you are now, for you to pass for being sane, for you to live out 65 or 70 years, for you to have gotten here. It has to go on. But insofar as it having any pertinence, not semi-pertinence, not pertinence sometimes, and then sometimes not degrees of pertinence, but that it is all, it's unrealistic. All you got to do is have some knowledge. It's unrealistic. It's silly, by and large. And if you don't like silly, it's sophomoric. It is truly, all right, I spent 5 minutes all that suggest and hint. As far as new intelligence is concerned, it is unimportant. It is unimportant until you think, that is, engage in the dialogue yourself. It is truly unimportant until you think otherwise. And as soon as you do, then all of my ministering to you, all of your ministering to yourself is out the window. That as soon as you are, you could be sitting there driving along thinking about how true that is, what he said, how true that is, and laughing at what's going on, and suddenly it hits a certain spot. It hits your G spot up here. Oh, wait a minute. And then suddenly you think along with it about something serious. And then it is serious. If I suddenly jumped up behind the seat and said, hey, I can hear your blood rushing, I know how to read that, you suddenly are taking some of that stuff seriously. You're listening to music, and now you're whistling along with those cheap music versions of the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or the Smiths. And that's junk. And you go, yeah, you were right up until just this. And you could say, this is serious. And I'd be wounded because you'd be right. If it's serious to you, it's what? It's serious. There's no way, you should know by now, right? There's no way that you can directly, intellectually deal with this flow. It is too fleet. It is non-stop. If you could go back and think about the first time, as you would call it, or as you used to call it, that you were conscious in the human sense. The first second, if you could remember that it was at 2:17, July the 16th, p.m., 1949, that you remember that was the first time I was suddenly conscious. That is, that there's a me and then there's a not me out there. At that second, what was the first thing you were conscious of? Now you could say, well, I remember I looked and I thought, that is my mother. Nuh-uh. That may be what you remember, but the first thing you were conscious of was being conscious. That is, the dialogue. You went, hey, I'm talking to myself. The reason I went through that is there's no way to directly do this process because you've got to understand, at the very least, now it was more than that, but let me put it to you this way. At the very least, this was going on a second before you saw it. That is, you turn around to the TV, the first time you ever saw a TV, the TV was already on. You did not walk over, are you following the parallel? You did not go over and turn it on and then go, I'm conscious of it. It was going on at least a split second before you became conscious at 2:17 on that date. It was already going on, or you'd had nothing to be conscious of. So it was going on. If you think now that you're going to catch up, you can't. Fleet. A tireless, broken field runner. You cannot catch it, you cannot stop it, you cannot tackle it. There is no way to directly try to deal with it, which is what psychology, religion, common sense, the dialogue itself tries to do. And it can't. It keeps things churned up. It serves its own purpose. But if you believe still that in some way you're going to wrestle it down, that you're going to slow it down, you're going to stop it, you're going to look at it, you're going to rearrange it once you get it stopped. What do you want me to call you? How about later? How about never? All right, how about I'll call you John and Jane Q. Public. Mr. and Ms. Everyone. If you can see it, again, I mean this literally. I'm just going to tell it to you as directly as I can, that should be able to pass into your experience once you can look at it this way yourself and actually experience it. It is rather, okay, strike rather. It is rather childish. Childish how the dialogue continually plans. It's either planning, just a few seconds from now, an hour from now, vague plans 2 years from now. It's either planning or it's rehashing the ordinary past. Without me hollering anymore, at least right this second, if you can get a free time, a kind of non-specific view of that, then I don't have to say that it's silly and sophomoric. It just is. What has it ever done for you? Now you can say, well, man's got to make plans, and you're right. But what's going on right this second of its plans, all you got to do is turn and look at it, and what good is that doing? You've been planning that, you've been running over in your mind, you couldn't count it, 427 times in the last 24 hours. You've already established, all right, when I get there, I'm going to do so-and-so. When I get there, I'm going to do so-and-so. Yeah, when I get there, I'm going to do so-and-so. All right, we said that. It's the music going on. But you can't stop and go, shut up, unless you're ordinary. I suggest it just becomes silly. That if not overtly, internally, the best it deserves, the worst it deserves, is a smile. It is silly, childish, impertinent to somebody doing this. To everybody else, it's life itself. Without that, people in the city are struck blind, dumb, deaf, unconscious, no longer full functioning humans. But somebody doing this, it's It's not even irritating. If it's irritating, then you're still it. It's silly. It's just noise. And you can't just give up the idea of shutting it off. You can't wrestle it. You can't argue with it. If you do, as that great Southern philosopher Joel Chandler Harris would say, you have taken up fighting with the tar baby. If you don't know the story, figure it out for yourself. There was a little dummy made out of tar, and one guy got behind it, a fox, and made the rabbit get so mad at it that the rabbit jumped and attacked the tar baby. And of course, the more he hit the tar baby, the closer he got stuck to it, and the fox just stood behind it and cried out a few more insults to the rabbit, and the rabbit hit it a few more times, and he was done for. That is, the attack was his downfall. So you could look upon, now I drug in other great world thinkers, you could look at the dialogue itself as being a kind of revolutionary tar baby. If you're going to stop and argue with it, deal with it, ask it directions, but especially start arguing with it, which is the first thing that everybody does. If you even start talking to people in ways that seem to be psychological, the first thing they do is take it all as being an attack. And if they're going to do that, that shows that they've got some interest in being attacked, and that also shows that internally they're open to their own attack. That is, they argue with their own dialogue. And look where it gets you. Look where it gets everybody. Well, it gets you anywhere you want to go, as long as you don't want to go outside the city limits. Next unrelated paragraph. Oh, all right, this may be connected. I don't know. Let me ask you this. What operationally happens in people regarding their bad impressions of themselves? Such as bad impressions, negative impressions. Someone says, I am too shy. I am too fearful. But I'm too shy. Let's go with that. That I am too shy. And everything at ordinary level of intelligence that would connote and drag in affects their image of themselves, as psychology would say. They think about it. They feel as though it's a problem. But now, what I want to ask you is, when it actually in the operations of life and the human being, the bad impressions, such as shyness, is this bad impression actually in the temporal, chronological events of the person being in a physical, actual event and being shy? Now, wait a minute, don't let your dialogue answer yet to the obvious. Is it that? Or is it the thinking of it? All right, if it'll make you feel better, I was going to say a quite subtle distinction. All right? It's not subtle. It's just closer to reality. It's more complex. Well, I was afraid of that. Think of any example in you. Things you do not like about you, just at the ordinary level. Don't try to explain away. Things you don't like. And of course, it has to do with your behavior. You don't have any choice. It has to do with what seems to be the dancing you're doing with life. Somebody in specific, a group of people specifically, a whole sex specifically. Something about your kind of personality that you don't find favor with. You feel as though it is a bad aspect, a weak aspect of your character, of your personality. Now, try and hear this. Is this actually based on an operational, a continuing awareness and the experience that your places? You're in actual events wherein you are subject, you are captive, you manifest this weakness. All right, let's say that it has happened and does happen. Okay, let's say that. But make that parenthetical, because that's not even the point, if that's where you're hanging up. But is it the actual events of this phenomenon, this behavior, you might want to call it thinking and feeling, but it's behavior. Is it the events of that actually happening? Is that the basis of your bad impression, your weak impression about you in that area? Or is it the thinking about it? I had every good reason to say that I was afraid of that, didn't I? All right. Everybody, the ordinary nervous system says, well, it's the former. I'm not even sure what you mean by the latter part. But it's obviously the former, assuming that you're not a psychotic. That if I feel like I'm too shy, it's based upon the fact that, by God, I'm too shy. Or else, why would I think I'm too shy? Assuming that I'm fairly sane. All right? We'll assume you're fairly sane. So old intelligence would say, well, the only reason I would feel as though I'm too shy is that I have been in events and circumstances, I continue to find myself in circumstances where, as far as I'm concerned, I am too shy. This is unprofitable. I suffer from it. Are you sure? Now, old intelligence would say, well, sure, because anything else is nuts. Anything else is some kind of subsequent recollection of it, some kind of subconscious or psychological attempt to deal with the real problem. Are you sure? This impression that I'm too shy and it's a problem for me, it's a weakness, is that based upon a continuing, I don't care how frequent, but a continuing string of actual physical events wherein you are too shy? That there you are, and yes, I am too shy, I'm hurting from it, it's unprofitable, I want to change it, I do not like it. Is that the basis of it? The operational basis of it? I'm telling you, if you get a better view, the answer is not necessarily certainly. But I don't believe I'm going to be able tonight to rub, or I not got the time to rub too many of you people's noses closer to the edge of this particular map. We got to turn the tape over just a second. Camera is still running when this is on?
Yes.
Should I take up doing mime or a tap dance or something like that? That's right, it's still picking up the audio, isn't it?
Yes.
I guess that's why I better fucking well watch it, right? What I say. Did you ever see that movie, Facing the Crowd? This guy was a famous TV guy, and then one night he thought the cameras and everything was off, and he began to talk to some of his floor people there in the studio and what he really thought of all of his fans. And then, oh, are we on? Oh, phew. Oh. All right. Okay. If you did not entertain the dialogue of talking about being shy, to say in that example, if, let us say, just sort of, you could stop, that you go, I decide to, I get the power to, or I give you the power to, I'm going to stop entertaining. I will cut off my internal dialogue about this one problem. That is, I'm too shy. That's been one of my greatest fears. That has plagued me from elementary school. It's affected my social life, my business life. It affects me walking down the street. It makes me clumsy. So, that's right, you got the power to change one thing. Regarding the dialogue. And you say, I want my internal noise to never talk about me being too shy. Now, so you got it. Now, try and ponder this again. Would you now be too shy? And I gave you a 3D. I went ahead and I admitted or I gave it to you as a basis, that in the 3D world, that there had to be some experiential basis for you being shy. All right? So that's already established. You were too shy at one time, and now you're still too shy. And now I give you the ability to cut off the dialogue. That is, you never talk about it to yourself again. But we still got the actual experience, right? I mean, the stuff that the city's made out of, right? The real stuff. Yeah. Would you now be too shy? Well, sure, now a bunch of you are laughing after 4 or 5 minutes of me dragging this out. Now some of you begin to go, oh. All right, since you cannot stop that, there's no frontal, profitable attack, what was I just talking about? What if, as I suggest, that you should be, that you will get to the point that the noise, whoever the noise is, whatever the dialogue, what circles it moves in, whatever it even has told you is the basis of certain of its peccadillos, its fears, its weaknesses, its idées fixes. I'm not good at pluralizing French. It's not wrestling with it. It just became old Uncle Fred up in the attic. I told you don't store idiots in your attic. You remember that? Well, I'll let Kyrute say it. You should never store a madman. You should not hide him out in your attic. Now, everybody ends up with one. You're here in this house, and up in the attic is something. Whether you've ever identified him correctly as a madman or a madwoman, crazy Uncle Fred is up there. And there is no profitable way within 70 years. There's just no profitable way in the 3D world to try to extricate him. Because once you know him for what he is, trust me. I didn't use this word earlier when I was saying childish and sophomoric. He's harmless. And once you realize he's harmless, why are you going to worry about getting him out? He's harmless. You might have to burn down the house to get him out. Do I have to carry the parallel any further? In other words, it could be, as I was hinting, or as I said, it could be really unprofitable. Doesn't it? I'm almost tempted to stop right there, but doesn't that almost give you a nice coda to tonight's song to just muse off to yourself, those of you who can do so, and in states where it's not illegal, just to muse off to yourself, what if everything in me, not physical real ailments, but everything in me that I used to call what I think, what I feel, if without any pretense, unless you know how to do it and it's the real thing, but if I just realized that it was good for a chuckle. I'm talking about the serious plans, the stuff going on about, well, what time is it? What have I got to do? And you do it over and over and over, and you've been doing it all your life. You're still re-choking your mother. You're still wrestling with your first wife, your third husband. That it just became part of the chuckle, if I must put it this way, it's a kind of short-lived, but many of you will really enjoy this. If nothing else is a chuckle, is to realize I've been doing this for 30 fucking years. Not just listening to it because everybody's been listening to their own, but for 30 years I listened to it and went, yes, yes. Well, of course, sometimes went, no, 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 no. And it's like, can you believe that? That for 30 years? There's a way in which the nervous system of man is made to plan. There's one way that I can describe properly. People even in the city could see this much, that would be one of the distinguishing characteristics of Homo sapien in the 3D world, is that he can plan. And I've even pointed out with other springboards and metaphors and tropes and other emblematic and paradigmatic ways that this is true with the nervous system. That in some way you do have to plan. But I'm going to tell you, once you get your intelligence operating at a different speed, at a different level, what passes for plans now will make you chuckle. Because let's say that you do have to plan. You have to decide, all right, I'm home alone tonight, or I live alone, I'm going home and I'm hungry. Knowing me and trying to think back, is there anything in my icebox or cupboard because I am really hungry? If not, I should go route home because there's a store still open and I will buy me something to eat so that I may stay alive another day. All right. But offering another speed, that kind of planning is passé. It's necessary to look after yourself. And so in a sense I can say that you still have to plan, but the kind of plans going on now, when I say they're sophomoric, it's like walking past the lounge downstairs at Georgia Tech or UCLA or wherever, and there's a bunch of sophomores, half stewed, half drunk, shit-faced on cheap beer, and they're talking about the important things they got to do tomorrow and next quarter, and you walk past, and it just so happens, by the curses of the gods, that you're sober that night, and you walk past, and you sort of have a good-hearted chuckle at, ho, ho. Those young sophomores, they don't know what it is. And they don't know what they're doing. Oh, let them go. They're having a little fun. They're not hurting anyone, and it's not going to amount to anything. That's it. They're talking about what they're going to do when they get out of school. And you're staying behind the door. You know how it is to be that drunk. Grandiose plans, and yeah, we'll do so-and-so. You know what it is with a bunch of guys 19 years old, been away from home for a year and a half, and the first time they've been 50 miles from their home, but there they are, drinking beer, and talking about how much they're going to make on Wall Street, and as soon as they get their BA, they're going directly to New York, and you're standing behind the door, and let us say that you are at least sophisticated. Still young enough that you're just a senior, and you listen to it and you think, yeah, God, I remember I used to do that. That's it! You're not mad. You're not going in and argue with a bunch of drunk sophomores and 19-year-old people going, yeah, as soon as I graduate, hell, within 2 years, I'll be making $90,000 a year. You can count on that. You think, oh, come on. If you got to stop and get something to eat, stop and get something to eat. What do you want? The rest of this dialogue. If you want to have kids, have kids. But are they a hobby? If you want to have parents, have parents. But are you going for the rest of your life to listen to this thing say, to remember the time that you told your mother, get off my back? And that was next to the last thing you ever said to her, and she died 10 years later without you ever saying another word. If you're going to have parents, why make that part of the hobby? What's that got to do with it? If you're going to make $90,000 a year within 2 years, make it. But are you going to sit around like a drunken sophomore and keep saying it? And of course, you've been saying it not for 2 years now. And check it out. You've been saying it for 22 years. And you keep listening behind the door like, yes, yes. Or you want to go in there and sit with these drunken 19-year-olds and sit down with them. So, right on, right on. Yes, we will. Well, if you begin to see how silly it is, you begin to see how silly it is. That's as good a word as any. Childish, impertinent, irrelevant, meaningless. Until, of course, you take it as being meaningful. And then by God, magic does exist, because just like that, it is meaningful. Just like that, you are now in the midst of the sophomores, and you're as drunk as they are, fighting for your turn, nodding along at their stories, and just waiting to join in and say, yes, hey, let me tell you mine. Oh, well. Maybe I'll give that ability to all of you for striking off all the holidays of the various religions that I can't use. For President's Day, they still have Ann Arbor Day. St. Quantum's Day. We're going to stop tonight. All you people out of town, Don't forget the Jazz Festival in St. Q's Day. Anybody wants to get down here with us? Anybody wants to meet us in the Big Easy? I noticed they never caught the Big Easy once we get there. Perhaps we make it No, being there with some of you makes me uneasy.